In the Pokemon world, Sinnoh might possibly be the coldest region to date, yet it represents something far warmer than the others. It's based off of Hokkaido, Japan, which itself is the coldest region in Japan. What's fascinating about Sinnoh's draw from its real-world counterpart is how the environment plays into the themes of Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. Mount Yotei, a stratovolcano and possibly the inspiration for Mount Coronet, was used perfectly in crafting Sinnoh. It is oppressive in the way it can be seen from every corner of Hokkaido, and it's especially cold. But even so, within it is magma that runs counter to its snow-covered exterior. Mount Coronet is the same, and its placement within the middle of Sinnoh could be seen as something dividing the inhabitants of the region. However, it also serves as a reminder for what this region stands for in regards to that dichotomy of it being hot inside whilst cold outside. This is also a pretty good time as ever to talk about Sinnoh since it's currently winter while I'm writing this. One of the unfortunate things about winter is how isolating it can feel. Everything is a bit harder to do with those you care about due to the weather getting in the way. But see, in Sinnoh, it feels as though it hasn't stopped them from banding together. And no matter what, Sinnoh is a region that's bound by its ties. Those ties create a holistic spirit of sorts. It goes against the cold climate and the harsh region that tries to isolate them. It's less of a place about contributing to a society and more of one that's about contributing to each other on a personal level. And with that said, I hope you'll join me as we go throughout the story of Pokemon Platinum. You start in Twinleaf Town, a little town on the west coast of Sinnoh, pocketed towards the southern part of the region. You aren't entirely privy to the harsh cold or the mountainous areas that lie ahead, but you can already see that this area is no stranger to the climate as there are patches of snow around town. Within this town is you, of course, and your mom, but also another person who could ignite a room, a region with his passion. As soon as you're finished watching the news, that person, Barry, bursts in to tell you that you and him are going to find that guy on TV, Professor Rowan, and see if he can give you both a Pokemon. It implies that as soon as this broadcast ended, he ran to your house and up your stairs in a matter of seconds. He immediately comes off as the energetic type, if you couldn't already tell. Either way though, he's clearly ambitious. It's like the idea of getting a Pokemon and going on an adventure has been in him for a while, and now he's really trying to capitalize on this chance. He even tells you he'll fine you 10 million Pokédollars if you're late, just showing how much he doesn't want to miss this, while also wanting you to be by his side. Although he's so scatterbrained to the point that he gets distracted a lot, and sometimes his body moves ahead of his brain. Barry later decides that the two of you should bolt through the tall grass to Professor Rowan's lab. Now, that either shows his dedication in getting a Pokemon, or it's that he's confident in how fast he can run, which kinda makes sense. But right now, you're a dumb little baby who doesn't know how to run because you don't have shoes that allow you to. But fortunately, Rowan stops Barry before he tries out his theory. He immediately recognized the intent behind your actions, then begins to wonder to himself if he should give you a Pokemon. His introspection brings up a great point in that often within these Pokemon games, we see children being thrown into these adventures that are pretty dangerous at times, and it always starts with the protagonist getting a Pokemon. So his hesitation is understandable since he acknowledges the sort of power he has with giving a child a Pokemon. It also implies he has some history of setting children down this path of becoming a trainer. But as he said in his interview, Pokemon are always by our sides. So perhaps he ultimately believes this co-inhabitance to be necessary for people. He tests you both by questioning your devotion towards Pokemon. You're both unwavering, but Rowan still holds some unease due to how reckless you both were in your initial plan to run through the grass. That's where Barry shockingly puts his dream aside for you and holds himself accountable. It shows a level of maturity, but also a bit of complexity in Barry. The space in between Rowan's words and Barry's response evokes a sense that he was waiting on his words, and that he can stop and reflect on things. It also shows a bit of reluctance in giving up his dream. but it's this act of maturity that elicits a sense of relief in Rowan and pushes him into giving you both a Pokemon in the end. So after Rowan and his assistant leave, he decides to initiate a battle to mark this occasion. His theme is a great match with his personality. The beginning plays with these horns going in a constant rhythm with this jump at the end. It shows how he can be somewhat methodical whilst still keeping that fast-paced rhythm that tends to overpower his ability to stop and think. But whenever it gets going, there are these piano keys in the back that are almost working in the opposite direction of the main melody. It's emblematic of how scatterbrained he is. After he loses, he decides to head home and rest with his Pokemon instead of rushing off like he usually does. It already shows a bit of growth in that he's raising caution to the wind rather than rushing ahead on the account of his Pokemon getting even more hurt. This bit of awareness creates some relief in that he'll manage on his own. Sometime later, and with running shoes, you meet Barry on Route 10 where he has the idea of catching the legendary Pokemon in the lake nearby as a way to thank Professor Rowan. Again, he's a bit in over his head, but his sense of gratitude works with his growth. You head to Lake Verity, and upon reading the sign before it, it states that this supposed legendary Pokemon in the lake is the one who gave emotion to humans. We'll see throughout the story that these tales of Pokemon being behind certain phenomena works to expand the lore of the Pokemon world, whilst being more prominent here due to said tales being lost in translation over the years. That degradation will be important in showing how modern Sinnoh operates with these myths, and we'll also see how these myths draw from our own world. Within Lake Verity, you're hit with one of the most serene and mystical songs that will play throughout the course of the game. The lake is surrounded by a forest while having few points open to the skyline besides on the water of the lake itself. The rest of the lake is out of view from the player, which creates a sense of intrigue and makes the presence of this Pokemon a bit more mystifying. Although this beautiful scene is disrupted a bit by a strange man named Cyrus monologuing to himself at the edge of the lake. It's as though he has some sort of agenda, or even a vendetta in how rash his words are towards the legendary Pokemon. His tone is calm, though almost emotionless. This proclamation of his sounds like it's a matter of fact to him. As soon as he leaves, you hear the cry of the legendary Pokemon. At this point, it's a bit too early to tell, but perhaps this Pokemon was pleased to see someone full of emotion like Barry. And perhaps that's why it only sounded its cry after Cyrus left, since he's a bit emotionless. Speaking of Barry, he realizes you both don't have Pokeballs because of course you don't. After heading to Sandgem Town to meet Professor Rowan and get Pokeballs, Barry comes running out of Professor Rowan's lab saying he's definitely not scary, but it's more so that he's out there. Barry then runs away, forgetting his plan from before. Inside, it seems that what Barry was alluding to was Rowan asking you both to help him with the regional Pokédex as you go along your new journey. Also, speaking of alluding to something, Rowan's assistant basically alludes to hurting you in the scenario that you weren't good to your own Pokemon. I think that's the fastest someone has threatened you in a Pokemon game. But in all seriousness, it reminds you of the importance of your bonds with your Pokemon, even though there is no alternative dialogue to measure any sort of mistreatment. Outside, Professor Rowan stops you and gives you the TM Return, which is a move that is more powerful based on the level of friendship between the Pokemon and its trainer. It's fitting that he would have something like that, given how much he finds joy in being with Pokemon. He seems young at heart in a way, and the fact that he holds on to TM still implies that he hasn't given up on the idea of going on more adventures, or aiding in others. But this TM also encourages you to do what you can to make yourself closer with your Pokemon, and therefore also benefiting you throughout your journey. You let your mom know that you're leaving on an adventure to fill out the Pokédex, and you get the sense that she also wants to go on one as well. Matter of fact, a lot of people in both towns seem to envy you, but your mom reminds you to come back every now and then to show her your new Pokemon. It makes you feel a bit special in how you have this chance that not many get, while also reminding you not to forget where you came from. Although unfortunately there is no point in coming back home besides a quicker heal. Plus, there's no way to show the Pokemon you got to your mom. Meanwhile, Barry never said goodbye to his mom, so at least you get props for being a good kid. After heading back to Sandgem Town and battling your way through the little Route 202, you make it to Jubilife City. Jubilife is the first major city you encounter and an area that introduces a pattern in Sinnoh's soundtrack. Jubilife's theme is very jazzy, and especially at night with the saxophone coming into play, but it also mingles with some synths to give it a bit of a modern edge while still feeling modest with the piano driving the piece. Jazz, the blues, and even funk are major musical draws within Sinnoh. Jazz and the styles that melded into jazz from the 19th century into the 20th were incredibly important in bringing people together within the United States and later Europe and Japan. And in the South of the United States during slavery, the blues was a vehicle for African Americans to come together and use to express life's difficulties during one of the darkest times in United States history. Martin Luther King Jr. would later say that jazz speaks for life. Jazz has its roots in history for helping the oppressed have a voice through music. It also served as something people could bond over regardless of who they were. Music itself is something we create to bond over in some magnitude. It continues to be that way in any genre. But jazz and the blues speak to a tumultuous time where it also pushed people forward and was the only thing that gave them hope. In Sinnoh, there's the climate and the environment working against its inhabitants to isolate them. And for Japan, it's extremely important given how isolated they were in the 19th century and past. Sinnoh is trying to highlight the things we've created and bonded over in the past, and even now. Besides the music, you and Rowan's assistant find a guy bobbing and weaving between light posts. His codename is Looker, but I love how he's acknowledged as a mysterious man and then a shady man in the text box. He works for the International Police and he's looking for a group of criminals who have been stealing Pokemon in Sinnoh. The peaceful tone this game has established through the mystifying and calm atmosphere is now disrupted by this knowledge. After talking to Looker and later getting your Poketch, you can head into the Poketch building and see that the company is family owned. It's not a big deal necessarily, but it's just a nice touch that reminds you of the theme of connectivity. This also brings me to the Global Trade Station, which was the real beginning of worldwide connectivity within a Pokemon game. It's nice to see that the first games that introduced this are also reflecting the importance of togetherness through its NPCs and storytelling. After defeating Barry on Route 203 and trekking through the Oreburgh Gate, you make it to Oreburgh City, the city of energy. As it suggests, the city is all about mining coal. They are Sinnoh's biggest source of energy, but they're also involved in excavating fossils as well. Though the mining industry in the real world isn't the most helpful for the environment, there's an NPC in the game who says that the mines avoid collision with any natural habitat. So again, although it may seem like the mining industry in Oreburgh would solely be an endeavor for pushing society forward without regard for Sinnoh's habitats, it turns out it's a lot more homely than it leads on. For one, Machop and probably other Pokemon help the miners as well. The mine itself is still open to many wild Pokemon, which gives way for trainers to train in the mines. And moreover, the gym leader, Rourke, is young, yet he oversees everything within the mines. Before heading into the mine though, you can find Barry at the entrance of the gym and he's already beaten Rourke. He mentions how tough he was and thinks of his own dad and how he wonders about his strength in comparison. You never saw his dad back in Twin Leaf, and the way he words it makes it seem as though his dad's a trainer, and a strong one at that. You then meet Rourke in the mines where he flexes on you for not being able to use Rock Smash like he can. That's when you head to his gym and beat him so you can use it. After running into Barry, who directs you to Eterna City, which is accessed through going back to Jubilife City, you run into Looker. He says he hasn't found any shady people in the city, yet in a moment you find Professor Rowan and his assistant being accosted by some shady people. Clearly, you're better at doing his job than he is. What's pretty funny is that the dude who's trying to haggle Rowan for his research is entirely ignored by Rowan. Rowan even begins to discuss with you about your Pokédex as though these guys aren't even here. One of them interrupts Rowan, which causes him to snap and list off everything that's wrong with them, including their outfits. He degrades them so much to the point that he calls them sorry specimens and reminds you to not be like them. You get the impression that Rowan isn't just all bark, given that it's alluded to him being a trainer in the past. Plus, he hands them off to you and his assistant like they aren't worth his time. The Grunts are a part of an organization called Team Galactic, which makes sense since they look like they're wearing a bunch of fancy spacesuits. Rowan theorizes that they wanted to take his research to learn more about the energy that is released from Pokemon through evolution. The reason why is because of the work they do in Sinnoh, which you'll find out later on. Oh, and this isn't a huge deal, but after the battle, a girl named Bebe comes up to you in the remakes and thanks you for getting rid of those spacemen by giving you the ability to customize your ball capsules. Stickers like the one you got from Roar can be put onto them to give your Pokeballs a certain effect when you send a Pokemon into battle. Now, what does this little feature have to do with the story? Not a whole lot, but it does serve to add to the idea that the little things we create can bring us together. Throughout the region, you will find tons of people just giving out stickers as a greeting or a source of conversation. It just settles you into Sinnoh a tad bit more. So yeah, I guess I kind of forgot to mention, I'm combining some elements from Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl into this analysis. It'll mainly be a Pokemon Platinum analysis, but there are a couple things that the remakes add that are definitely worth mentioning. After using Rock Smash to get through the Ravaged Path and battling through Route 204, you're greeted by Floroma Town. The angelic orchestral arrangement works along with all the flowers scattered around town to make this place one of the most majestic and peaceful towns in Sinnoh. It's also said that the prevailing scent around Floroma Town is that of honey. There's also this meadow north of the town that is possibly one of the most beautiful sights in Sinnoh. All that can be seen are countless flowers and their loose petals that flow in the wind. Behind the town's appearance is its history in that it used to be barren until humans started planting flowers in the area. Unfortunately, that did nothing until one day someone expressed gratitude towards nature. That's when the area became full bloom like it is now. This connects to a tradition where people collect Gracidia flowers to make bouquets to give to someone else. It's not a stretch to think that the people here view this tradition and the act of gratitude in general as a way to maintain the land. Beyond valuing the relationship with people and Pokemon, we see in Floroma the importance of it with nature. Although secretly, it's most likely that the reason why this town is like this is because of a certain Pokemon known as the Gratitude Pokemon, which we'll see later. In a sense, the people of Floroma uphold a tradition that works both ways in honoring nature and Pokemon while giving thanks to each other. Now, this is where I talk about berries. Again, it's not integral to the story, but it plays into the idea of gratitude in the effort of taking care of the environment. You can take berries throughout Sinnoh, but you can also plant them back and sometimes get more berries in return. Also, there's the reporter on TV who will acknowledge you for maintaining these berry areas and commend you for it. It's a nice little touch which works in a way to express gratitude for your actions, but also giving a reward in the process with more berries. It's just like how Floroma Town was blessed with its flowers through the Gratitude Pokemon acknowledging their intent, which gave way to them having a flower shop and a honey cellar. But we'll get to the honey cellar later, as Team Galactic has disrupted the scenery by blocking you from getting into the meadow. In the meantime, on Route 205 you can find a girl who tells you about how her dad is being held up by a bunch of spacemen in Valley Windworks. After being the Team Galactic grunt in front of Valley Windworks and saving the honey cellar from the other two in Floroma Meadow, you're awarded with a key. With that key, you get inside Valley Windworks to find out that Team Galactic is stealing power for something big. You battle your way through the grunts until you make it to Commander Mars, who gets a little meta in agreeing with how people find their aim confusing. At this point, she's kinda right. She puts it plainly by saying they want to create a new world that's better than this one. Still, how they're going about it doesn't really add up yet. She doesn't exactly seem like the most visceral type in how she wagers you in a battle. After defeating her, the scientist, Charon, states that it didn't matter anyway since they had enough electricity for their aim, though he mocks Mars for losing to a child. It's clear that Charon and Mars don't get along since she snaps at him and mocks him for being new to the team. Before they leave, Mars shows a bit of devotion to her boss by saying that he's the only one who can order her around. That willingness to work under someone evokes a bit of intrigue in who this boss is and why she follows them. In any case, now with Team Galactic gone, the little girl and her father are reunited. Looker then arrives just after they left and directs you to Eterna City where he believes their hideout is located. After trekking through Route 205, you make it to Eterna Forest where you're immediately met by Cheryl, a woman who asks you for help in getting through the forest. Her reasoning is that she's afraid of being attacked by Team Galactic. And even though you've defeated them at Valley Windworks, it seems as though their name is growing steadily, and to the point where their presence is sort of a newfound source of dread for some in the region. It motivates you to get through this forest and to Eterna City so you can stop them once again. Besides the influence of Team Galactic, there's the feature of a partner character. Again, this calls to the idea of connectivity, albeit not the best of circumstances since she's in fear of a sinister organization attacking her. There are 5 instances in which you work with another trainer to trek through a certain area. There are so many benefits to being with a partner character, like for shiny hunters. Eterna Forest is a perfect early game spot to get double encounters. Your partner will always heal you after battle, so grinding is easier. Also, getting into battles is far quicker if you encounter 2 trainers with your partner, although when it comes to the AI of your partner, that can be a different story. Being with these partner trainers is really nice though, since it kind of feels like you're having someone just join you for a little bit of your journey. In a way, it kind of reminds me of the Pokemon anime and how Ash has many partners himself across all these different regions. However, I guess I will say I wish there was a bit more dialogue between the two of you that would flesh these characters out. But talking about the environment itself, the forest is so dense that the floor of it is covered by shadows of the trees, save for a few spots where the sun seeps in. The piano in the backing bounces back and forth from channel to channel as though there were Pokemon surrounding you making noises in the trees. It feels almost melancholic with how desolate the instrumentation feels at first, but it soon shoots up and gives you a sense of determination since you have a partner with you to help you through the forest. You and Cheryl battle your way through the forest without seeing Team Galactic until you reach the exit where she thanks you for your help and parts ways with you. Past the pond, you're greeted by what sounds like a horse trotting along a road when entering Eterna City. The flute even sounds like some old man kicked back in his chair on the porch just whistling the day away. Then that same old man switches to his harmonica and plays the same melody whenever it ramps up. The picture these instruments paint is perfect for the atmosphere the city gives off. It's a bit gravelly like Orberg, but not as much. There aren't many big, flashy areas of interest either. It's just a laid-back city. The rest of the song backing the city is what I describe as cowboy jazz, not to be confused with cowboy bebop. It has this old-timey feel which relates to the look and the slogan of the city, History Living. That aspect of history is important as there's a statue in town of an ancient Pokemon that people believed once existed. In Diamond and Pearl, there's different writing on the statue's plate which calls to what this Pokemon did for the universe, that being the creation of time or space. In Platinum's case, both descriptions are there, while some say there once was a third one. But it's all this hearsay that makes this myth feel like one in our own world, given how many interpretations we have of the appearance of God. And like in the Pokemon world, mythology is used as a way to understand the constructs of the universe they live in, while also using it as a way to understand each other. Like in Floroma Town just a little bit ago, the story of how the town began to flourish may be viewed as a myth, while those in the town still adhere to the tradition that it created. While in Eterna City's case, they used to honor the statue during festivals, but it still remains now as a symbol of the past. At the statue, you see Cyrus now analyzing it. He soon leaves after deciding that the truth of this Pokemon should be uncovered. His motives don't necessarily seem ulterior like they did back at the lake, though it beckons whether he's simply seeking to understand the myths of Sinnoh or if there's more to him. South of the statue and in a house, there's an NPC who discusses what Eterna City represents and how it's maintained that essence even though the city itself has grown. What's valued most in Eterna City is the past. The old-timey music, the old Pokemon statues still being preserved, and the slogan of the town makes this pretty clear. And some of the people in Eterna City still keep this aspect alive by telling the stories of the past. Even if that story changes over the years, it's still something they use to connect with others since that's inherently the nature of storytelling. And ultimately, the truth isn't entirely necessary to them. Matter of fact, they might even prefer that these stories of old have turned into myths. But to Cyrus, on the other hand, it seems like this means nothing to him. He's merely fixated with the facts and nothing more. This falls in line with how emotionless he's seemed so far. And if you aren't familiar with other Pokemon games, I think it becomes pretty clear that he's associated with Team Galactic since he wishes to uncover the myth, whilst Team Galactic is trying to do exactly that. And on another note, this brings me to their presence in Eterna. You see many of them wandering around the city as though they aren't criminals, yet the populace is confused on whether they are criminals given how open they are. Team Galactic's wealth and influence got them their new base in Eterna just recently, as a matter of fact. On the news they say that the Galactic Building is the #1 place to check out in Eterna. It's probable they paid off the news for that piece given how disconnected it is from the city. And it's strange how they'd want to stand out so much given what they're doing is clearly wrong. Although we'll soon see what they use as a guise later on, and why these moves in the public eye are solely to confuse the populace. First though, since you're here you might as well get another badge. And on the way there, you meet Cynthia, a trainer who is studying mythology. She's instantly drawn to you by your Pokédex, and she also mentions Professor Rowan, which makes it seem like she once worked with the professor. After that exchange, you head to the gym and defeat Gardenia, an antsy gym leader who often watches the old chateau in Eterna Forest but is too scared to go inside due to the stories people tell about it. And I mean, the inside of the chateau is definitely not normal. There's a ghost of a girl and a butler roaming around the manor and a pain that stares at you wherever you go. There's even a TV that works due to a ghost Pokemon called Rotom possessing it. But again, it's another example of how storytelling impacts the lives of those in Eterna City. Well anyways, now that you can karate chop bonsai trees, you can infiltrate Team Galactic's Eterna building. Inside, you find Looker who's undercover as a grunt. He doesn't really help much besides giving you a tip to go towards the stairs on the right. Looker does hit the nail on the head in terms of how clear it is that everyone in Team Galactic is operating on little to no knowledge of the true goal their boss has in mind. Most of them describe the goal and are either vague or clueless on the whole New World idea. After taking out all the grunts, you make it to the top where the bike shop owner is being held up by Commander Jupiter. She's a bit more visceral than Mars and how she mocks you for your intentions of saving the Pokemon they stole. After defeating her, she abandons the building with her grunts like Mars and Charon did since they were only there to investigate the myth surrounding the Pokemon statue. This makes it pretty clear that Team Galactic was the one who stole the plate on the statue. And before you leave with your new bike gifted by the bike shop owner, I want to touch on the Grand Underground in the remakes. There's a feature where getting 40 leftover energy from Diglett's and Dugtrios garners you a boost in luck when mining and an extra shiny roll if you're shiny hunting in the Pokemon hideaways. The interesting bit, and a way the remakes have expanded on the theme of connectivity, is through the online and local component in that it's easier to get 40 points with other people. So by working together in the underground, you can help someone boost their odds while shiny hunting, or give them access to better statues. Now to Cycling Road. Under it is Wayward Cave, and where you meet another partner character in Mira. She's a trainer who got lost after catching some Pokemon in the cave, so you help her to the exit. And it's through working with her that she turns you into a role model of sorts and vows to be like you so she won't get lost again. It's a bit disconnected from the story since it's not mandatory, but it still falls in line with what I discussed earlier about partner characters. Before entering Mount Coronet, Rowan's assistant shows up to give you the Versus Seeker. This item plays into connectivity as well through its use of letting you rematch trainers you fought before. It makes it so that these trainers aren't all just one-off encounters. The unfortunate part about it is that either none or not all of their teams scale in level or change, so you don't really feel a sense of growth with the other trainers. Inside Mount Coronet, you meet Cyrus, again, who just pops up out of nowhere and starts spouting philosophy to you, then leaves. It's not the best way to have a conversation, but it gives us insight into his ideals. He aligns himself with the facts, or the simplicities of how life came to be. Space and time forming, then humans following after. It's the spirit born within humans which he distastes. He believes it to be the cause of all strife. It's ironic that he says this, since it's pretty obvious he's connected to Team Galactic, who are a major source of strife. Again, it's a matter of his true position in the story that still lies in obscurity due to this paradox he's introduced. But I would also like to posit that Sinnoh is trying to convey a different message to that of Cyrus's. It's trying to show that the human spirit is important and that it has provided joy through the connections we make in life. And in Sinnoh's case especially, it shows all the little things we do to stay connected to each other within this harsh world. And in a way, Cyrus draws parallel to the environment of Sinnoh and how he's harsh and cold. After the little bit of Mount Coronet and Route 208, you find yourself in Hearthome City, a place where the essence of Sinnoh is reflected in almost every way. A Baneri bumps into you as it was running off from its trainer. Seeing Pokemon being let out of their Pokeballs and roaming about like people isn't all too uncommon in Hearthome. That Baneri was kinda showcasing that. But a place that showcases this even more is Amity Square, where you can take your own Pokemon out and walk with them. Just like the partner characters in the GTS, following Pokemon is a perfect addition for Sinnoh since it coincides with that idea of connectivity, but more so with Pokemon here. It's unfortunate it only became a main feature in the Johto remakes though. At least it returned in full in the Sinnoh remakes with the addition of increasing the Pokemon's friendship. Another thing in the remakes is an NPC who will let you make Poffins in Amity Square with your Pokemon hanging around the pot, which is cute. Poffins are food for Pokemon that raise certain stats for super contests, which also works as a way of a conversation starter for many in Hearthome City. This degree of coexistence between humans and Pokemon is also reflected in that Hearthome City has a Pokemon fan club. That's not to say the other locations in Sinnoh don't reflect this, it's just that Hearthome City is more expressive about it. You probably see the most Pokemon out in the open in Hearthome, and that's not counting Amity Square. To the inhabitants of Hearthome, this is the perfect place to be for any person or any Pokemon. You often see families with Pokemon right next to them. Plus, all the buildings have elevators for children, Pokemon, and the elderly. It makes that slogan of warm and kind seem very fitting with all the accommodations the city makes towards bringing people and Pokemon together. The broad appeal of Hearthome naturally brings travelers from outside of Sinnoh. The super contests are something broadcasted worldwide, and it also serves as another thing Hearthome's inhabitants discuss. There are many who still wish to be a trainer and challenge their gym leader Fantina, but there are as many who wish to become famous through participating in the super contests. Meanwhile, Fantina reflects all of this. She was attracted to Sinnoh because of its contests, then she became famous through them while also becoming Hearthome's gym leader. This perfectly shows how the things we create can even extend globally and pull others together. Funny enough, your own mom even has a history of being in super contests, and she knows that judge Kira you met earlier. This is also one of the few times you see your own mom outside of your hometown in a Pokemon game. Matter of fact, she goes out to another place in the postgame, which makes her one of the most adventurous ones by a matter of most of them never leaving their homes. It's another addition to keep the people of Sinnoh active and away from feeling isolated. Now, one last aspect of Hearthome's culture that I want to touch on is its cathedral. In here you find many NPCs who discuss philosophy that deals with the value of life, balance, spirit, nature, and so on. It's a place where people can come together and express certain aspects of life that they've come to admire. This appreciation for life exists freely without scrutiny or anyone trouncing another's value with their own. Instead, these values form a bigger representation of what Sinnoh represents and what it tries to inspire in its populace. And one NPC that hit me hard on one of my playthroughs is the older woman sitting on a bench discussing loneliness. She treats the feeling as though it were simply another state of mind and something that's more of a reminder of your own longing for others. Cyrus, on the other hand, believes that these emotions are a hindrance given his denouncement of the human spirit earlier. It gives a more insightful look into the duality of emotion, whilst also reminding you of the essence of emotion. Similarly, an older man towards the far right speaks of how the act of creation can fatigue one's spirit, but it's through healing one's spirit that the desire comes back to create once more. He speaks about this matter in a way that doesn't find anguish in the cycle, but beauty. In this cathedral, the human spirit is admired and represented in its full glory through these people, but beyond it, it's represented in Sinnoh as a whole. At the end of the walkway in the stained glass is Mount Coronet in all its splendor. It's idolized for its representation of Sinnoh and its people. The clouds swirl around it as though it were pulling in its surroundings, just as the people in Sinnoh do anything they can to pull each other together as a singular entity. In a sense, Sinnoh itself is a character through the sense of community and the values it expresses through its populace. In this cathedral, there is no music. It wants to give you the time to soak in the words of these people without distraction. It's an act of respecting these values and showing you how important these sentiments are to Sinnoh. And with that said, let's go fight Fantina. Compared to the last two gym leaders, Fantina leaves you with a piece of advice and saying that it's one step at a time and becoming stronger. This is another aspect of Sinnoh that very well could have been found in the cathedral. Strength isn't something that has to be rushed. There's a process with everything, and taking your time to do other things or form bonds with others could be viewed as even more empowering. This sentiment is extremely fitting because as you're about to leave the city, you encounter someone who does tend to rush things, Barry. This new outlook makes you wonder if he's considered any of these perspectives through his time in Hearthome or Sinnoh in general, and if there'll be any repercussions to his hastiness in the future. Past the tower on Route 209 is Selacion Town, where Barry meets you again. He directs you to Selacion Ruins so you can get defog and go back in the tower. Selacion Town, though, itself is a laid-back town in a similar vein to Eterna City. It, like Eterna, is steeped in between smaller wooded areas and rugged land, whereas Eterna is in between Mount Coronet and Eterna Forest. Besides that, the demographic consists of mostly farmers and ranchers due to there being a small field above and part of Route 210, and also since the area was once Sinnoh's biggest location for Pokemon ranches. There's also the long road that was the first thing created in Selacion. It brought people and Pokemon together naturally, since people would pass through here, thus giving way to a Pokecenter, a Pokemart, ranches in the past, and now a daycare. But the next stop is Selacion Ruins, where only Unknown can be found. There are scriptures on various walls made in the letters of Unknown. The most important one says, "Friendship. All lives touch other lives to create something anew and alive." This harkens to that idea of one spirit, but also a holistic spirit formed throughout the bonds of others. The human spirit hasn't recently begun to be revered by those in Sinnoh. It always has, judging by how old these ruins seem to be. It connects to the theme of tradition as well, in that the people of Sinnoh openly spread this message, but in their own ways. But with defog, let's backtrack a bit to that tower. It's known as the Lost Tower, and it's a place where spirits of Pokemon rest. Being so close to Hearthome makes this sort of place fitting in how much the city blends Pokemon into the daily life of humans. A Roughneck NPC says that Team Galactic took his Pokemon, but given that he's here, it leads me to believe he means they took his Pokemon's life. He realizes after the battle that it does him and his Pokemon's memory no good if he continues wallowing in his sadness. It's another example of the duality of life, because though life may be gone, there will always be the memories we can live with. On the surface, the rest of the trainers feel a bit disconnected in that this place is where the dead should be respected. But at the same time, Pokemon battles are kind of done anywhere, which includes indoors. Plus, you could argue for some of them that this is how they grieve. And for others, this place, or death in general, has moved them to view death as not a negative thing necessarily. Some were brought together by a Pokemon, like the couple on the 4th floor, and now they honor that Pokemon by visiting them. Another pair seems to have been here many times out of respect for their Pokemon as well. They view life now as a new passage while not neglecting the past memories they've had with their Pokemon. Similar to Spirit, we see the passage of life being respected here in the sense that these people have either grown to accept the passing of their Pokemon, or they're learning to. It's then revealed at the top of the tower by an older woman that Ventina regularly visits the tower as well, despite how eccentric she may seem. Perhaps it implies some history she has with a past Pokemon, but we'll never know. Ahead of the Lost Tower and Solaceon Town is Route 210, which is an extension of Solaceon in a way. There are many more ranchers, farmers, and breeders like in Solaceon, but there's also a cafe which fits with the old western aesthetic. They sell Moo Moo milk here, which is a nice touch given how this area was once full of Pokemon ranches. Unfortunately, you can't go north of the cafe since there are Psyduck in the way. The only place to go is east, where you're met with the rocky and rainy Route 215. The slight bit of verticality fits with the historical development of Sinnoh in that the city up ahead was carved out of a mountain. That city happens to be Veilstone City. Similar to Jubilife, it's a more modern looking city compared to the larger but slightly older looking Hearthome, although it has that bit of verticality I mentioned due to being carved out of a mountain. Attraction wise, Veilstone has the most to offer with its huge department store, its game corner which later turns into the Metronome style shop, the Pokemon gym which is also a literal gym, and Team Galactic's headquarters. This abundance of things to do and see is reflected in the song that plays for the city. It's sleek and somewhat larger than life, and how you think it'll diminish after the first crescendo, but then it ramps up again and again. But there's also a tinge of darkness to it, especially with that xylophone in the back. I feel like a detective walking around in the slums of some city, snapping my fingers and looking around for a lead on a case. Which, speaking of crime, Team Galactic's presence has been a little bit quiet since Eterna City, and to see another HQ that's even bigger is a little shocking. But again, it seems as though they make their moves accordingly, then get low and use their HQ as their front for the public. Despite how odd the grunts look, of course, inside it seems like a normal building where space business is done, I don't know. Given the receptionist's small talk about cosmic energy, their guise seems to be that of an energy company. Regardless of how normal they act, to some degree, we still know their crimes. So, not only does their position in the city make it feel as though their shadow stretches across its entirety, but they also add to the cold atmosphere already established by the stone walls creating paths with little to no freedom. But this cold atmosphere also derives from the fact that Veilstone is a bit more superficial than most areas in Sinnoh. I mean, the game corner and the department store speak for themselves in how they draw out the materialistic side in people. This makes it even more fitting that Team Galactic's HQ would be positioned here, given Cyrus's clear association with them, and since he would probably prefer a less spiritual place. However, though these aspects of Veilstone seem shallow, the intent is still to provide an isolated nation with something to do, and I'm not one to judge how others find distractions in life. But speaking about those distractions, Rowan's assistant has been engrossed in Veilstone's attractions, and as they talk to you about challenging the gym leader, they're interrupted by Crasher Wake, the 5th gym leader who's a swimmer, a pro wrestler, and a singer. It's quite the range of talent. He just came from training with Maylene, a young gym leader who appears to be newly instated judging by the way Wake talks about her. It's a nice little touch knowing that these gym leaders go about other places than their own city or town, and sometimes they have relationships with other characters. Before the gym though, there's another person who's gotten caught up in Veilstone's attractions, Looker. He's been in the game corner investigating Team Galactic apparently, and totally not gambling. But never mind that, let's go fight Maylene. So after punching the punching bag so hard that they decimate tires, you clear enough of them to reach Maylene. You defeat her, but like Wake alluded to before, it really feels like she is new to this whole gym leader thing. And moreover, she might even be suffering from imposter syndrome since she doesn't understand her own strength and how she became a gym leader in the first place. Soon though, we'll see her make efforts towards understanding her own strength with another gym leader. Plus she has Wake, you, and all the other challengers to help her understand why she's here. But perhaps Veilstone has deprived her of this sense of community that is more explicit in other areas of Sinnoh. As soon as you get out though, you meet Rowan's assistant again, but this time Team Galactic stole their Pokédex. You help them get it back by battling a couple goons, and of course, Looker gets there too late. You investigate their warehouse with him, and it becomes clear that they're hiding something since there's a locked door in the way. Now, in the real world, this would make sense since companies need to protect their goods. But here we're talking about the Pokemon world, where you can just waltz into anyone's home and steal from their trash cans at times. The Grunt and Looker did mention something was being transported to Pastoria City, the home of Crasher Wake's gym. You trudge through the labyrinth of fences on Route 214 until you reach Valor Lakefront. The actual lake is blocked off by cameramen waiting to catch the legendary Pokemon in the lake on video. The area though is that of a resort since it's situated against the coast and the lake. This makes it an ideal vacation spot for tourists and Sinnoh's residents alike. After battling in the restaurant in Valor Lakefront and on the coast in Route 213, you arrive in Pastoria City. Pastoria is known mainly for the Great Marsh and its gym. The marsh, and I'd assume Pastoria City as well, were once a part of the ocean. Given that it once was the ocean, it makes sense that their leader is a water-type expert. Pastoria calls to a specific time in the past, just like Solaceon Town and the Pokemon ranches. Solaceon and Pastoria use the same backing track, which speaks to the similar atmosphere they both give off. They're also both pretty laid back in that there isn't a whole lot to do, nor are there any flashy areas like in Hearthome and Veilstone. Similar to Hearthome though, this place idolizes Pokemon, but specifically those in the marsh since the marsh is the only place some of them can be found, barring the remakes. Krogunk, for example, is their mascot. The Great Marsh is sort of like a wildlife reserve since the area is managed by the city and apparently Crasher Wake, as we'll see him take care of it later. The Pokemon in the marsh can't be caught or battled at ad nauseum like in any other routes since they would probably become endangered given this is the only place they can be found. But on the topic of the marsh, a Team Galactic grunt is loitering outside of the observatory gate. Remembering that mention of a shipment to Pastoria creates a bit of worry in what he'll do. But because he hasn't done anything yet, you head to the gym where you battle Barry outside. He leaves saying he's now Wake's apprentice, which makes sense given how energetic they both are. Following that, you make your way throughout the gym and defeat Crasher Wake for the 5th badge. What's interesting though is that when you meet Barry outside, Wake then comes out to tell Barry he isn't his master, but also that he knows his father. Knowing that Barry's dad is a trainer and that he's connected to Wake somehow brings more intrigue in what kind of trainer he is. Besides that, Barry overheard that grunt from earlier mention something about a bomb which sends Wake sprinting towards the observatory gate because of his love for his city. It turns out you all were too late as the grunt invaded the marsh and detonated a bomb. Crasher Wake, at fear of losing the Great Marsh, rushes in to take care of the damages with his water-type Pokemon, I'd assume. The Great Marsh is the pride of Pastoria due to it being a major moneymaker, sure, but it's also because it represents what Pastoria has become. It's similar to Floroma Town with how it came to be as well. Barry stays behind to help Wake with damage control while you chase the grunt. Looker arrives late yet again, but joins you in the chase as soon as he makes the connection to the explosion he heard. You defeat the grunt, which kind of doesn't do anything, as you'll see later, which removes a bit of agency. Often with these Team Galactic encounters, your actions have some weight to them, like you saving the Pokemon in Eterna City, the Professor in Valley Windworks, Rowan in Jubilife, and much more later. But the sequence feels a bit pointless. Well, besides that, Cynthia shows up to research the folklore surrounding the lake and the possible legendary Pokemon inside the lake's chamber. Barry then speeds by telling you the Great Marsh is okay and that he's gonna find Team Galactic and teach him a lesson. Again, his rash nature is getting in the way when it's clear this organization isn't just involved in small crime, but now terrorism. Cynthia gives you a secret potion for the Psyduck on Route 210 since she wants you to continue having an adventure in the same way she did when she was younger. Like Eterna City, we'll see where Cynthia comes from and why she values the past so much. Though it makes you wonder how her and Cyrus's ideals diverge even though their interest in mythology is the same. Cynthia later shows up again on Route 210 after you cure the Psyduck of their headaches. I like to think she was like hiding in a bush or something, waiting for you to cure them. Maybe it's because she's afraid of Psyducks, I don't know. She gives you an old charm to bring to her grandmother in Celestic Town, which I don't know why she didn't just give it to you before when she gave you the secret potion, but whatever. In Celestic Town, you hear the Eterna City theme, which is quite appropriate for how strongly tied this place is to the past. As a matter of fact, Celestic Town is said to have been here since Sinnoh was created. It calls to the past and things like the town not having a Pokemart, and how some residents prefer older technology. Because of this, it doesn't get many visitors. But that's not to say there's nothing to see or learn. Honestly, Celestic Town says more about Sinnoh than any of the other larger areas. In Cynthia's old home, you're told of the legendary Pokemon in Lake Verity known as Mesprit, the being of emotion. Cynthia's grandfather also mentions Yuxi, the being of knowledge, and Azelf, the being of willpower. They together keep Sinnoh balanced with their strong spirits. There's also an old book stating that these legendary Pokemon came together with their power to give humans their spirit. Like myths in our own world, Sinnoh's legendary Pokemon are touted as the bringers of certain phenomena. In this case, though, these myths in this world are true. Regardless of the truth, an important aspect in mythology is how humans learn about themselves through mythology. Cynthia herself is trying to uncover how humans interacted with these myths compared to now. We see that her interest lies in the effect it has on humanity instead of the truth, which Cyrus wishes to uncover. Cyrus disregards all intent behind mythology and its effects, that being to give some sort of understanding or meaning to our lives. To Cynthia, understanding older interpretations of Sinnoh's mythology could provide different perspectives for a more modern Sinnoh. See, uncovering the truth isn't necessarily a bad thing on the surface, but it's Cyrus's cold demeanor and lack of regard for what these myths offer others that's the problem. This attitude and close-mindedness makes him seem disconnected from reality and how distant he is from the human spirit. Which, speaking of Cyrus, a Team Galactic grunt is in front of Celestic's ruins, threatening to blow up the town with a bomb. Cynthia's grandmother wishes she could deal with him herself, which falls in line with how Cynthia described her. You also see that this grunt is a reflection of Cyrus's ideals and how he calls this town insignificant. It's as though these historical locations are merely pieces of a puzzle with no deeper meaning behind them in the eyes of Cyrus. You defeat him, and Cynthia's grandmother thanks you. She reveals that the old charm Cynthia had you give to her is a relic related to the Pokemon who created Sinnoh, so it seems this was one of the fruits of Cynthia's research. Inside the ruins, you find a painting of the legendary lake trio maintaining a triangular formation with a glowing sphere in the middle. The glowing sphere could represent the harmony they provide those in Sinnoh. It could be life itself, and that life cannot continue with these aspects of spirit. And this could extend beyond humans and Pokemon if you want to take it that far. I don't think I'm as equipped as some to discuss plant life and how they compare to humans, animals, and in this case, Pokemon, but there is something there to argue that plant life can replicate these three elements of spirit in some fashion. And beyond the naturalistic aspect of it, there are cultures and religions that view plant life as equal to that of human or animal life, like early Buddhist teachings. This topic of spirit and its cooperation with life as a whole extends into so many different perspectives that it's practically impossible for me to list them off in a way that serves them justice. Ultimately, Sinnoh is more so focusing on the human side of spirit since it of course comes from a human perspective, although it doesn't discredit any other interpretations. The intent is to make you consider these different perspectives in our own world while providing its own through the game. Well, anyways, as Cynthia's grandmother is discussing with you the importance of the trio, Cyrus appears, seeking to learn about them as well. Cyrus recognizes that these three maintain the stasis within Sinnoh, which goes against his wishes to mold Sinnoh and the rest of the universe into his ideal one. He calls the world incomplete, as though these traits given to humans by the trio are a hindrance. Again, for someone to disconnect themselves from these concepts must make one feel lonely and even seem psychopathic. Although it's clear that Cyrus isn't entirely devoid of spirit. For one, he already has incredible knowledge of these myths, and he knows how to run an organization in Team Galactic. He has the ambition as well to create his ideal universe. Although, out of the three, he does seem somewhat lacking in emotion. But he's ultimately still human, and the one that he does show is contempt. This world is beneath him in his eyes. He plainly threatens to destroy the painting since it has no meaning to him and therefore should have no meaning in his new world. You stop him, but he realizes that all he needs are the Pokemon who created time and space for his plan. These concepts of time and space are very essential for life to exist, and so Cyrus believes them to only be necessary for life. He fails to realize that spirit is as necessary as time and space. But it ultimately stems from this nihilistic point of view that there is no meaning beyond our spirit or beyond our existence as a whole. I can sort of understand his line of thinking, but without spirit there won't be anything. Cyrus disregards all that has come from life, the things we have created to give each other meaning, and the spirit we've been given to find that meaning. So he leaves the conversation entirely alone in his beliefs. With Surf now, you can battle your way through Sinnoh's #1 fishing spot in Route 218 to make it to Canalave City. The city is another coastal city and one of Sinnoh's major ports. With the seawater seeping into the city to form a canal, it makes the atmosphere feel fresh and spacious. The backing track is a bit majestic and almost forlorn to start with the harp and the piano. It kind of feels like you're gazing out into the vast sea, longing to sail on it. But there is sort of an adventurous quality that arises later on, which relates to how Canalave connects you to 3 other islands to explore. The major draw to Canalave, though, is its massive library that details many of the myths in Sinnoh. There isn't anything to read on the first 2 floors, but on the top floor there's a decent bit. To start with the first story, Sinnoh Myth, it deals with emotions, which alludes to it being about Mesprit. However, the role of the Lake Trio is to maintain balance with 3 other Pokemon, as we'll see in a bit, and nothing more. They don't tend to go near humans. It feels almost like a boogeyman story in a way because of how the saying warns you not to do these things. Perhaps this confusion could be purposeful in how it reflects that some stories may shift over time. The next one, Sinnoh Region's Mythology, makes it pretty clear in stating why Pokemon appear before trainers and allow themselves to be caught. But the other layer lies in this Pokemon who can command all Pokemon and future Pokemon to come. This sort of influence on the world is godlike, and makes you wonder if this creator didn't just create Sinnoh, but the whole universe. Next is Sinnoh's Myth. This speaks of the Lake Trio, but it's that last part that's mainly of note. It states that they had the power to make vast lands, which doesn't fall in line with the literal description of their abilities. Perhaps this is a misconception since, again, this could have been altered throughout the years. Plus there's already a Pokemon in Groudon who is involved with creation of land. But maybe it's not necessarily a misconception of their abilities. Looking at Floroma Town, Mesprit gave humans the ability to feel gratitude, which led to the Pokemon Shaman responding to said gratitude by giving them a bountiful land. Uxie gave humans the knowledge to understand what makes a land hospitable, while Azelf gave them the willpower to make the initiative to create said hospitable land. So maybe it shouldn't be taken too literally. Veilstone's myth speaks of a man who killed and, it sounds like, ate Pokemon. The Pokemon he encounters seems to be a bit unclear since there is no major Pokemon related to Veilstone, although it is likely that the man lives in Veilstone and when he ventures out it deals with a Pokemon somewhere else. There happens to be a nearby area which is home to a certain legendary Pokemon that we will see later. This Pokemon is a bit less merciful compared to the godlike Pokemon in Sinnoh region's mythology who could also speak. It's also kind of fitting that it's Veilstone since it is the furthest from the spirit that Sinnoh reflects. Now with Sinnoh folk stories, it splits in 3. The first details humans eating fish Pokemon but letting the bones go in the stream and letting the flesh grow back on the Pokemon. It isn't too far-fetched to think this is true given Pokemon like Slowpoke can grow back new tails since some people treat their tails as food. Also, I think it's pretty clear that a dead fish Pokemon relates to Basculegion, which was found in Sinnoh when it was known as Hisui. The second one is a bit unclear in what Pokemon it relates to because there is no Pokemon that can literally shed its own hide and appear as a human. But the final line does lead it to sound like Zoroark from Unova. In a sense, Zoroark is a human within its illusion, but donning the Pokemon hide part relates to the fact that it is still a Pokemon. And again, there were Hisui and Zoroark and Zoroa back during the time of Hisui. Although it could also be alluding to Pokemon evolving into humans, which I just don't want to think about. The third calls to a time when Pokemon were even closer to humans than they are now. There are human-like Pokemon, of course, but the way it describes this also kind of feels connected to the idea of Pokemon evolving into humans. Whether there's truth to this, it's a bit tenuous to argue since it doesn't match with Sinnoh region's mythology, which has a bit more to go off of. But the point of them being equal is what's important. Hearthome City is a good example of replicating the sense of equality in how Pokemon live harmoniously with humans. Next, the original story describes the tale of Sinnoh's creator and how it created the Pokemon universe. It calls to Greek mythology with the mention of how everything began with chaos. But structurally, it relates more to Taoism, mainly referring to the concept of yin and yang due to the duality of time and space represented by Dialga and Palkia. Now, I'm gonna save a horrific myth as it relates to the Lake Trio, which you'll catch soon enough. But one last thing, I lied about there not being anything on the other 2 floors. There is a new book that can be found on the 2nd floor in the remakes that tells the story of a Pokemon in the East Sea called the Prince. The timing of it seems very obvious in that it's most likely related to Legends Arceus. Moreover, it mentions a location never mentioned in modern Sinnoh. This Pokemon called Prince could relate to Manaphy since it is referred to as the Prince of the Sea in the Pokemon Ranger and the Temple of the Sea movie. Also, Buizel plays a prominent role in the movie while Mantike has a slightly prominent role as well. Qwilfish is seen in the movie as well, but it doesn't do as much as the other 2. However, that mention of huge spikes for Qwilfish seems really unnecessary since it didn't add any other description for Buizel and Mantike. So perhaps it's alluding to a Hisuian form for a Qwilfish that was found in Sinnoh's past. But regardless, I think the point of it is to show how close Pokemon and humans could come together back then, regardless of the Pokemon being caught. I'm writing this before Legends Arceus, so I guess we'll see how poorly this will age. Anyways, now that we're done nerding out in the library, you can go fight Barry, which we're just gonna pretend you snuck past him while he was on the bridge, just so you could get to the library. After beating him though, you head to Iron Island to meet another partner character in Riley. Like I mentioned earlier about the advantages of partner characters, Riley points it out himself by inviting you to come train with him. You find out that he was asked to be Oreburgh City's gym leader by Byron, the gym leader of Canalave City. He gave it up to let Byron's son, Rourke, be its gym leader instead. It makes you wonder though why Byron would pick Riley over his own son. Despite that, it's another nice bit of world building to show that interconnected aspect within Sinnoh. Now it's time to fight Canalave's gym leader, Byron. The first thing he says is that it's no wonder you beat his son Rourke since he has a lot to learn. He's a bit hard on his son and seemingly not understanding of what else Rourke is capable of, like managing the Oreburgh mines. But while Byron's words seem negative initially, after the fight he puts Rourke in the same boat as you and Barry when saying the future of Sinnoh is bright. So even though he believes his son has much to learn in terms of strength, perhaps he does recognize those leadership qualities Rourke exhibits. This reverence for the future generation of trainers is the first mention of the future in a region so ingrained in the past. It shows that Sinnoh isn't entirely fixated on the past. Now that I think about it, Barry is also reflective of the future in how he constantly moves forward without ever looking back. I mean, this dude still doesn't have a Pokédex. But at the same time, he'll also connect us to this admiration for the present later on. So while the theme of the past is still more prominent, Sinnoh is a place where differing perspectives exist freely. All the while, Cynthia connects these three concepts through her research, since she's trying to learn about the past to understand the present, which may change the future in bringing back these older interpretations. But sticking with the past, you meet Barry, Professor Rowan, and his assistant at the library, where you're all given the task of investigating the legendary Lake Trio. Barry is sent to Lake Acuity, which is the most northern part of Sinnoh and has one of the harshest paths to it. Barry basks in Professor Rowan's appraisal of his strength, yet he looks away from you as though he's a bit unsure of really being the strongest one in the room. Also, his response to Professor Rowan is a bit hesitant, and that's pretty uncommon for him. But just then, the ground shakes and this crashing noise can be heard reverberating off in the distance. Rowan tells you all to proceed outside carefully as Barry runs down the stairs as fast as he can. Outside, you hear from someone that there was a huge explosion at Lake Valor. This then causes Barry to kinda get serious and run off stating he has a bad feeling. Given the bomb incident at Pastoria, it's clear what's going on here. Barry must have recognized this as well, which shows that insightful side of him again. Although he still rushes off alone, which is a little worrisome. At Lake Valor, it's as you'd expect, it's swarming with Team Galactic. A couple of them mention attacking Lake Verity, which makes this attack at Lake Valor seem like it's a part of a bigger and more calculated scheme. But no matter how fast you go to get out and make sure Lake Verity is safe, it doesn't matter because they've been one step ahead. Upon defeating the prideful Team Galactic commander in Saturn, it turns out his battle with you was a ploy to buy time and Azelf is already gone. At Lake Verity, it's the same case. Thinking back to the beginning, the lakes were these serene and holy places where Sinnoh's metaphorical pillars rested. Cyrus always had his aim on them from the very beginning, judging by that proclamation at the beginning, and now he's tainting this serenity with his ideology. At the entrance, Rowan is even stopping them himself. Whether he's fighting them with a Pokemon or he's just grabbing them by the ear, it still amazes me to see a Pokemon professor getting in the action. But you battle your way through to find that Rowan's assistant just lost to Mars. With Mesprit already taken, Mars stays behind to get revenge against you for embarrassing her at Valley Windworks. Defeating her isn't too much of an issue, but what's most disheartening about this is how they use the attack on Azelf as a way to catch Mesprit. They're manipulating them by forcing them to act upon the bonds they have with the other Lake Guardians. With Team Galactic gone, you see that Barry is nowhere to be found, leaving Lake Acuity as the last place for him to be. You trudge through Sinnoh's biggest obstacles, Mount Coronet, Route 216, and 217. Thematically, the trek through these extreme environments represents the peril Sinnoh is in right now as Cyrus is on the cusp of achieving his goal. Literally speaking though, these places are the coldest in Sinnoh, which is emblematic of the person Cyrus is, but also the world he wants to create. Mount Coronet itself is entirely devoid of human life, while Route 216 and 217 are actually pretty full of people, despite how packed with snow it is. And it's that aspect about both of the routes which would be paradoxical to Cyrus, I'd imagine. He doesn't understand that no matter the environment, people will still find a way to get together because of the human spirit. And even within the routes, you find houses that are set up for people to rest from the cold. And also in between both the routes, you can find Maylene training by jogging through the routes without her shoes. It's also to get to Snowpoint City so she can see her friend, Candace, Snowpoint's gym leader. And on the topic of Candace, Barry already defeated her and scaled the cliffs so he could check on Yuxi. That's where you head to Snowpoint City so you can catch up with him to make sure he isn't alone against Team Galactic. To touch on Snowpoint City though, it's like a winter wonderland due to the perpetual state of snowfall. The backing track gives a sense of tranquility, which is appropriate since the city is relatively lax due to the points of interest only being the gym and Snowpoint Temple. The space in between the bell-like synths is reflected by how quiet the city is since it's one of the least populated areas in Sinnoh. It calls to that theme of isolation and how Sinnoh's harshest terrain separates it from the rest of Sinnoh. But that's not to say its inhabitants dislike this aspect. Rather, the quietness is what makes Snowpoint unique. Not to get too cheesy, but the people here serve as their own warmth through their sense of community. Even the gym leader, Candace, works as another layer to this within Sinnoh. Like Mount Corna itself, she's an ice-type trainer, yet she might be the most friendly character you'll meet in Sinnoh. And the warmth she exhibits is like the magma beneath Mount Cornet's surface. I didn't mean that to sound like a pickup line, but I guess it just did. Anyways, with Candace defeated, you can catch up to Barry now. Although, as you probably suspected, you were too late as he was just defeated by Jupiter. She demeans him for his goals and laughs at him as she walks off with Yuxi, or she either had Yuxi taken before the battle. We see a huge change in Barry's demeanor now as he realizes he was too fixated on the result of winning or losing instead of the journey in getting to be stronger. Similar to Cyrus but on a smaller scale, he didn't care about what came with getting stronger, like forming bonds with the Pokemon he met through his journey. Every time you see him, he's always talking about battling, getting stronger, the gym leaders, and hardly anything more. And it's here you watch him hit his first major setback after trying to ignore his shortcomings when fighting you. This moment parallels the scene in the beginning when he almost put you in danger by having you run through the tall grass. And in this case, he couldn't save Yuxi. This urge to rush through things as fast as he can really beckons why he does it in the first place. There's been mention of his father and him being a strong trainer. Perhaps he's been rushing through his journey just to get to him. He's all too fixated on the goal and he's never really learned anything about what it's like to actually be strong. With this in mind, he doesn't run off like usual. He simply walks away, most likely thinking about his next step. As Barry leaves to figure out his own values, it's time for you to raid Team Galactic's HQ in Veilstone to save the legendary Lake Trio. Looker finally makes himself truly useful as he obtained the storage key so you can assault their base from the back. You two split up in the Team Galactic warehouse as you begin taking out the grunts and scientists one by one. After getting the key to infiltrate through the front entrance, your presence becomes known to the rest within the building. Soon after, you find the transcript of the plate that was on Eternus' statue, and you meet up with Looker outside a big venue where Cyrus is giving an address to Team Galactic. Here he's way more energetic and empowering. It's a stark contrast to that of his more lifeless tone. What he's saying isn't too much of note, which actually kind of makes it of note. His ambiguity on the matter of his new world isn't recognized by his grunts, and they simply cheer him on and agree. He's blatantly appealing to them through their own sense of greed, thus leaving his real aim in obscurity. It's starting to become clear that Cyrus has been manipulating his subordinates with these false promises. He even tells them that he hates strife, yet they themselves fall under this concept due to the crimes they've committed. Through acting personable with his subordinates and telling them half of the truth, he strings them along and creates this facade of being a trustworthy leader who has their best interests in mind. After his speech, Looker even recognizes it as a performance, which further shows these two versions of Cyrus. And even upon making it to Cyrus's room, he admits to it all being an act. He couldn't care less about Team Galactic. He views them as the issue. He just abuses their criminal nature by appealing to the same thing he hates, the human spirit. Your being here becomes clear to him as he allows you to free the legendary Lake Trio since he's done with them. It's this intent that he doesn't understand since he looks at you with intrigue and describes you as an interesting specimen. Again, you see this disconnect from reality and that these simple things like compassion have ceased to exist in his mind. But it's also this position of greatness and this deep feeling of contempt for you and the world around him. This same contempt for you leads to anger as he begins to battle you. With the revelation of Cyrus's view on Team Galactic, a new aspect to his theme unveils itself. Compared to the grunts and the commanders, his theme stands out so differently. The bass guitar gave the other two themes a funky edge, while here it serves as a dark undertone. Additionally, the lack of the electric guitar and those techno-sounding synths in the other two themes makes this one feel a bit more grave with its more stark and slow orchestral backing. This menacing feeling it gives off is perfect in mirroring that contempt for Team Galactic that he's been suppressing for however long. There's also this weird distortion towards the end that is appropriate in showing how skewed his worldview is. But overall, it's perfectly orchestrated to show just how alone he is in his ideals and how they're entirely different to that of his subordinates. And on the topic of this difference, I want to touch on his and the other commanders' naming scheme. Cyrus's name is derivative of the sun, but also the hero, which I'll come back to later. This is significant because his ideal world is solely for him and no one else. And after the battle, he'll also mention something that calls to this idea of everything revolving around him. And of course, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn figuratively revolve around him due to how much they admire him. One little touch that may or may not have been intentional is that Mars is clearly more devoted, which could call to Mars being the closest to the Sun out of the three. Also, Charon is derivative of Pluto, which is funny since it's a dwarf planet. It shows how he doesn't really fit in with Team Galactic and how everyone seemingly hates him. Cyrus ends up losing the battle while not really having a strong reaction. He merely says, "Interesting." It's a blanket statement since he doesn't really understand your point of view. He tells you he has abandoned all emotion, which isn't entirely true, but for him to want such a thing is perplexing, and it makes you question what brought him to this decision. Furthermore, he doesn't view his Pokemon as tools like his subordinates, nor does he find it necessary to form bonds with them. He values them only for their power, whilst not mistreating them like the rest of his team. This point of view is clearly derived from his ego, and it calls back to his intent. Even though, yes, he does lean on his subordinates and his Pokemon to do his bidding, there isn't a shred of compassion for any of them. He may be a trainer and even the leader of Team Galactic, but he's entirely alone. He bids you farewell as he believes his destiny awaits him at the top of Mount Coronet. After he leaves, you head to the depths of the HQ where you're hit with this haunting song that's made up of what sounds like machine noises. The scientists you talk to tell you how sickened they are by Cyrus and what he did to the legendary Lake Trio. It creates this uneasiness and, dare I say, dread, which isn't typical for most Pokemon games. Beyond the door, it isn't as grim as you'd think, but you still find the legendary Lake Trio suffering inside strange capsules. Charon and Saturn discuss the nature of Cyrus's plan and what will be done with the Lake Trio. Charon's unwillingness to say what he truly means gives the sense that he's being disingenuous about being under Cyrus's wing. Saturn seems like he almost suspects this as he scorns him for his strange sense of admiration towards Cyrus. Saturn admits to you that he doesn't understand Cyrus's true ideals, yet he continues to follow him blindly and battle you. Though it's clear his suspicion has led him to act differently as he allows you to free the Lake Trio after defeating him. Charon begins to question the state of Team Galactic due to how you dismantled them so easily. It's clear he thinks of himself as disconnected from Cyrus as he starts to consider a new plan for himself. After letting the Lake Trio go, Saturn reveals that Cyrus used them for their red crystals to create something called the Red Chain. Up in Cyrus's room is a computer detailing his plans with this red chain. He came to the notion that by using the red chain on a Pokemon, it will let them use their whole power, whereas catching them with a Pokeball will not let them use their true power. He ultimately plans to shackle the creators of time and space on top of Spear Pillar and force them to create his new world. With the small glimpses of Mount Coronet out of the way, you're now here to face the brunt of Sinnoh's most treacherous landscape. The narrative works well off of the environment by having the last few areas you go to being the most harsh and cold. It's as though the environment is working against you with Cyrus. Before reaching the summit, Looker appears and finally resigns himself and admitting that he can't face Team Galactic due to not being a trainer. He puts his faith in you by giving you a black flute that'll lower random encounters, but don't tell him we have repels though. On the surface of Coronet's mountainside, the movement is pretty vertical in how you're rock climbing up and down while the snow is relentless to your advances in reaching the peak. The theme initially expresses this very soft quality in the light bell-like synths and brush tones that reverberate as though it's the sound of snow falling from a tree or a small jut in the mountain. But as soon as the keys come in, it reminds you of how treacherous this mountain is, with how stark and chaotic they jump around to that of the light tone established in the first couple seconds. They also retain this muffled quality to them which reflects the endless snowfall. At odds with how treacherous it appears are the strings that swell upwards to give you a sense of hope, but still descend to make you question if you're too late yet again. The horns soon take over and stand out like a sore thumb, which represents Team Galactic's presence. The bass guitar used in many Team Galactic themes reveals itself to set off this cacophony of sounds that spiral upwards in this chaotic formation and dissipates like snow flowing in the wind. It creates a great deal of anxiety for what Cyrus is doing up at the peak while you're still maneuvering through this mountain. To further this unease, some of the grunts have now seen Cyrus's true self and are even questioning if they're going to see this new world. It becomes all too clear that this is Cyrus's final act since he's now dropped his facade. At the peak, you're hit by the harsh wind and the appearance of ruins known as Spear Pillar. Not only does the wind create this oppressive atmosphere, but the instrumentation is so heavy to the point that it feels suffocating. You take down the strongest grunt supposedly, but Mars and Jupiter stand in between you and Cyrus. As they're about to double team you, Barry shows up to partner with you. Given how fast he is, this last minute appearance really makes it seem like he used his time wisely to understand the values he needed to strive for. He helps you defeat the commanders, which also works in getting his revenge against Jupiter. He makes another mature decision in resigning himself to the sidelines, knowing that he's not yet ready for what stands in front of him, that being Cyrus. Unfortunately, you're still too late as Cyrus pulls out the red chain and pries Dialga and Palkia from whatever dimension they rest in. With these two legendary beings in his presence, he commands them to reset this universe to one that is devoid of human spirit, one where humanity is reset to zero. But then, the Lake Trio appear to save Dialga and Palkia from his clutches. As Cyrus lashes out at you and the legendary Lake Trio, the air grows heavier whilst a puddle of nothingness begins to form behind Cyrus. Within this black void appears two red eyes that rise in a haunting, shadowed form. Before Cyrus can command Dialga and Palkia to create his new world, this being gives us a FNAF jump scare. But in all seriousness, with Cyrus being pulled into that void, Cynthia appears and reveals that that Pokemon you saw was Giratina, a being that rivals Dialga and Palkia in power. It governs another dimension known as the Distortion world. As seen by how distorted Spear Pillar is already, Cynthia says it will continue to distort the rest of the world if left open. You and Cynthia jump in to find a realm devoid of the concepts of space or time. Everything is in chaos as strange rock formations flow and move in directions that can't be defined. Although there needs to be some sort of progression or linearity, so it's not as though this place is impossible to traverse for the player. Another layer is added to this peril the universe is in because the destruction of the Otherworld would mean the destruction of the Distortion world as well. It calls back to the notion of yin and yang and how both worlds must coexist for the universe to maintain itself. To further add to this notion that both worlds must coexist, Cyrus compares the stasis of these two worlds as to that of the sugar phosphate backbone in a DNA strand. He believes that Giratina interfered with his plan because he would have been disturbing the structure that was set in place when the universe was created. Because of this, he believes he can defeat Giratina, which will end this world and let him go back and create a new universe. It seems pretty antithetical since there's no way he could do it that quickly without the universe collapsing due to the destruction of one of the worlds. Perhaps this could just be a bit of hubris showing since he believes the universe should adhere to his wishes. But anyways, the legendary Lake Trio guide you through the Distortion world until you're directed to a landmass where Cyrus awaits. Cynthia challenges his ideals and telling him to just live alone somewhere far from humans. He kinda repeats himself here, but the idea of this being his justice and that he can't hide away from something that needs to be changed just shows how skewed his perception is. It also adds to that translation of his name being the hero. He essentially views himself as a hero and how he'd be gracing humanity with the ability to feel complete without a spirit. Whether that means death and that's what he's implying, who knows. His anger spills out of him as he begins a battle with you. His defeat brings a new insight into his character that seems almost tragic. He bemoans his loss, saying, "Not after all the sacrifices we've made to get this far." Due to this lack of connection to anyone besides his Pokemon, it really begs to ask, what does he mean by these sacrifices? This is merely an assumption since the game never really elaborates on this, but perhaps he's alluding to something happening to him and his Pokemon in the past. Or maybe he just views working with other people as a sacrifice. But one last thing he gives you before he leaves is this moral dilemma. Your venture to complete the Pokédex would need you to catch Giratina, which he states would close the Distortion world and cause the Otherworld to collapse. Perhaps the implication of his goal was to kill everyone, since he says that now you'd inherit his legacy. He still views his way as one that would repair the universe, but your way of destroying it would still end up eradicating the human spirit, which would be fine for him. We not only see this lack of regard in human life, but we also see how that lack of regard also includes himself. It makes him incredibly depressing to think that he essentially hinged his entire life on killing himself and every other human as a way to make a universe that wouldn't have to endure any possible damage from humans. It's an extremely nihilistic take on existence, that's for sure. And although the notion of existence may be a strange one, all we can do is give each other meaning in some way so we can look forward to tomorrow. Cynthia takes this approach. It's through helping another in this way that we derive some sense of belonging, and therefore serve a part in this world. At the end of the day, yeah, this rock we live on can keep flying through space without life on it, but we're still here and there's no getting over that fact, so we might as well create some meaning to it. This is exactly what Sinnoh is trying to convey. It's all these little things that we have to help us get through our lives that just keep us living. Mount Coronet and the harshest points of Sinnoh come together to act as that nihilistic point of view Cyrus spews, whilst Sinnoh's inhabitants and all the things created by them serve as that optimistic point of view. Another layer to this is that Giratina holds Cyrus's disposition as well. The act of leaving that portal open at Spear Pillar could be seen as him meeting Cyrus's malice with its own. Matter of fact, Gira was excommunicated by the Pokemon who created the universe due to its temperament. And again, this is an assumption, but I feel it isn't too far to think that it views Cyrus as a reflection of humanity and thus why it chooses to let the Distortion world destroy the Otherworld. The only difference between the two of them, though, is that Cyrus is incapable of understanding why the human spirit is necessary for life. He's conditioned himself to believe that. Meanwhile, Giratina can. It appears before you as you initiate a battle that will decide the fate of these two worlds, and the universe itself. Part of me wishes they let Giratina have a voice so we could understand its perspective in this battle, or maybe there was some other way to gauge it through, like its demeanor, so that we could see how we're changing its mind. But either way, you defeat it or capture it, thus changing its mind to revert the portal from Spear Pillar, and also to let you return. Cyrus returns to see Giratina sided with you, causing him to become enraged. He finally acknowledges his own emotions and calls himself incomplete, which falls into this contempt he holds for everyone and himself as well. If I had to imagine how he was brought to this, I'd guess it stems from his youth, in which he found himself at odds with these emotions whilst trying to connect to others. At this point, yes, it's an assumption again, but later you will get something that sorta implies this. On a level though, I get it. No one wants to feel these negative emotions like sadness or anger. But if we recall from that one person in the Cathedral of Hearthome, perhaps there's another side to these emotions that could be viewed as positive. Since there's sadness, we can feel joy. When there is anger, compassion is born. These words strike the core of what it means to have emotion. It reminds us that we have the capability to feel anything at all. But on a surface level, it reminds us that we'll soon be able to feel the opposite of these emotions. Again, calling to the notion of yin and yang. With the implications of his goal in mind, Cyrus extended his own hate for himself onto others. It's an incredibly sad way to live. He turns the other way, still holding on to the only thing he has, his dream. But he knows that dream will never come true, now as he chooses to dwell in the Distortion world, forever alone. After being let out at Send-Off Spring, you head to tell Rowan about your safe return. Your disappearance shook him as he contacted as many people as he could to begin a search for you. That scene where he questioned giving you a Pokemon comes full circle, as I'd imagine your disappearance made him feel responsible. But you're here and tomorrow is saved. That's all that matters. Remembering the legendary Lake Trio who helped you through the Distortion world, you had to go see them. At Lake Verity, you meet Mesprit, who runs away, seemingly wanting you to chase it across Sinnoh due to how playful it's always been. Rowan then shows up, and the development of his research on Pokemon evolution just ends abruptly because the Lake Trio didn't tell him anything about it, which is a little lame if I have to be honest. But I guess you could view his satisfaction as a parallel to the notion that these myths in Sinnoh don't all need to be solved because mystery will forever create intrigue. In a way, this is kind of the point of Pokemon. There will always be more Pokemon to find and new evolutions or forms that will follow suit. But now that you're searching for the legendary Lake Trio, I can discuss a horrific myth from Canalave Library. It details the result of harming Azelf, touching Mesprit, and looking into the eyes of Yuxi. It essentially takes all spirit away from a person if they do so, which is pretty terrifying. But what's interesting though is the fact that Cyrus and Team Galactic mention nothing of this happening to them, even though they at least harmed all three. Matter of fact, if you want to take Mesprit's running around Sinnoh in another way, it could be that it's running away from you out of fear of you touching it. Then there's Yuxi, who keeps its eyes closed so that it won't erase the memories of those who look at it. And then there's the mention of Azelf being cautious around people and Pokemon, perhaps out of fear of getting hurt by them. So it's reasonable to say that these actions are to protect humanity from themselves, so they won't ever take away this gift they gave to them. It's made even more palpable knowing that they let themselves be harmed by Team Galactic without stripping them of their spirit. With that said, after catching the Lake Trio to one of the most unnecessarily head-banging battle themes in all of Pokemon, you head to Sunyshore City. As the name suggests, it's one of the most warm and bright areas in Sinnoh. It as well is another use of the environment reflecting the tone within the story. Like I mentioned, Route 216, 217, Snowpoint, and Mount Coronet were cold and treacherous to some degree. But after saving Sinnoh, and the universe for that matter, you're open to explore Route 222 and Sunyshore City, both easygoing and bright places on the coast of Sinnoh. Sunyshore's theme does a great job in conveying this through how carefree it is. The synths and the saxophone that carry the melody feel so spontaneous and triumphant. In tandem with all the other instruments that play in such an upbeat manner, it feels like this uplifting force behind you, pushing you forward. It not only cements you into the present and gives you thanks for what you've done, but it also tells you you're so close to the end. That bass guitar also makes an appearance here, but it serves as this funky foundation in propelling all the other sounds in a positive light, whilst having no dark undertones whatsoever. This bright tone is reflected in how the roads of Sunyshore are literally composed of solar panels, which provide the city with its electricity. This city is also so bright in a sense due to how it's never been touched by Team Galactic. This is awfully strange since you find out that Cyrus was born and raised here. So why wouldn't he go after the place that is clearly most antithetical to what he represents? Maybe it shows some sort of sentimentality he still held? Who knows? Cyrus, though, was said to shun others and preferred to play with his machines, but he was brilliant in school. And I'm sorry to get ahead of myself here, but I feel this is most appropriate in bringing it up here. In the post-game, you meet Cyrus's grandfather, who laments on not raising Cyrus himself and leaving him in Sunyshore with his neglectful parents. He states Cyrus's parents also held high expectations for him. The stress from these expectations could speak to why he looks older than he is. His grandfather is still haunted by this to the point where the sole reason he tells you this is due to his own shame for not taking him in and still not knowing if it would have been the right decision. But if I had to say, I think it would have been the right decision. He's clearly someone who cared and still cares for Cyrus. Cyrus wasn't getting that from his parents, and so he never truly felt compassion. Now, I'm not a professional, but if I had to give some sort of psychological evaluation, I'd say Cyrus's neglectful parents caused Cyrus to become emotionally stunted at a young age, which bled into his adulthood. It's only when he grew aware of the fact that he lacked compassion and harbored only contempt that he realized something was wrong with him. It's possible he tried to connect with others, but never knew how to due to his parents pushing him into a mindset that only disconnected him from crafting relationships of his own. And of course, at some point he realized that he and the rest of humanity were better off without Spirit. His hatred for Spirit makes his denouncement towards Mesprit at the beginning of the game seem a bit more pitiable due to this neglect he endured as a child. Makes you also reflect on your own position in Sinnoh, since Mesprit had been nearby all along and you never really faced the challenges Cyrus had to. And so as you went on your journey, you carried Mesprit's ability to feel for the people in Sinnoh like Cyrus never could. This also applies to Cynthia now she's a direct foil to Cyrus in how her upbringing and her beliefs are the complete opposite to his. All in all, this bit of backstory we get on Cyrus evokes a newfound sense of empathy in the sense that you can understand how he was pushed into disregarding his own spirit. Besides Cyrus, another person of interest in Sunnyshoar is, of course, its gym leader, Volkner. First you meet his friend and Elite Four member, Flint, who wants to reignite Volkner's spirit since he's been bored of being a Pokemon trainer lately. So here we see someone similar to Cyrus in the way that they've kinda lost one aspect of their spirit, that being willpower. And even though Cyrus couldn't be saved, you can at least help Volkner. You go to the lighthouse to let him know that you're here to challenge him, which I'm guessing he just spends his days here looking out to sea, bored out of his mind. You later show up to his gym and defeat him to show him how fun it is to battle. And with that, you're done with your gym challenge, and it's time to head to the Pokemon League. But before that, you encounter Barry, who seemed to have been training again while you were getting your last badge. Barry even has a bit of introspection here, saying that his entire journey to this point has been sort of a dream, one where he's trying to be like his dad. He takes his realization at Lake Acuity a step further here in outright admitting the fault of being too idealistic and not grounding himself in reality. And furthermore, instead of internalizing that fear of you being stronger than him, he admits it outright as well. He warns you though by saying if you don't beat the league before he's done, he'll beat you himself. It kind of fills you with a warm sort of feeling knowing how much he's grown to appreciate this journey the same way you have. Or at least I hope you have. A familiar face in Jasmine from Johto was listening in on your conversation and felt this as well. And as she mentions, Barry may be your rival, but he's also someone you've been sharing your journey with, which falls into that theme of connectivity. She gives you HM Waterfall and you head on your way. Opposed to the snowy routes of 216 and 217, you have the calm and warm sea of Route 223 that connects to the Pokemon League. As soon as you swim up the waterfall, you're met with this heartfelt track at the entrance to Victory Road. It's played in such a way that makes it feel hesitant yet methodical. The space in between the notes feels vast and forlorn. They reverberate to show it's no one else but you here at the edge of this waterfall. The minimalist nature of the night version is also incredibly soothing to the point of it almost serving as a lullaby. The purpose is not only to make you reflect on your journey so far, but to make you reflect on who you are now after all those experiences. Typically, in other Pokemon games, the track around here is empowering and pushes you forward. But compared to the rest of the series, it feels as though they wanted you to sit here for a moment and soak in the experiences you've had. At the same time, the strings that arise towards the end of the night version remind you that you still have a little more of this journey left. but the sole purpose is for you to take solace in who you've met and what you've accomplished so far. A feature that helps you keep track of this is the notebook, which shows you some of the highlights of your journey when you boot up the game. It creates this idea that you, as the player, are recording all of your experiences in a notebook because you want something to always look back on. After soaking in the view of Sunny Shore from atop the waterfall, you enter Victory Road, ready to face your final challenge. You traverse the winding cave and battle the region's toughest trainers until you reach another cathedral like Hearthome Cities. Again, it's another draw to the past in using this Gothic architecture. Inside are the Elite Four and the Champion awaiting your challenge. But before that, Barry catches up to you and challenges you to a fight, deciding who will attempt the league first. With Barry's development nearing its end, though there's a little bit more in the post-game, his battle animation reinforces his characterization even more here. That little thing he does where he jumps up and down on each foot, shaking his fists in the air, illustrates how he's been able to live out his dream. But when he stops, he becomes stern and realizes that in doing so, he needs to be conscious of what it means to get strong. And in effect, to be like his dad. Becoming the champion was a way to prove that. He'd always been ambitious from the very beginning and saying he'd catch Mesprit for Rowan, but he forgot the Pokeballs. That intro was a direct parallel and a setup to his misgivings later on in the story. Unfortunately for him though, you were always ahead of him in the sense that you valued your journey and the effort it took to get stronger. He leaves knowing he still has more training to do. And as he tries to catch up to you, you enter the hall to the final 5 battles that will decide if you're worthy of being the champion. You find yourself taking down Aaron, the bug enthusiast, Bertha, the ground-type veteran, Flint, Volkner's supportive friend and all-around passionate guy, then Lucian, a psychic-type user and book connoisseur. With them all defeated, you step inside the room of Sinnoh's champion, Cynthia. She thanks you for your help at Mount Coronet, but accepts your challenge while truly, and I mean truly, defending her title. Ultimately, after many resets, you manage to defeat her. And to steal Cynthia's words, a few minutes ago, you were the most powerful challenger, and now you just became the most powerful trainer in Sinnoh. Rowan appears before the Hall of Fame to witness yet another one of his pupils being crowned the champion of Sinnoh. And with that said, you enter your Pokemon into the Hall of Fame as the credits roll. While that happens, you ride throughout Sinnoh, reminiscing on your journey once again. The music playing is extremely nostalgic with how somber it is. It's a calculated effort to remind you of the importance of your past, since this is what Sinnoh's all about. And yeah, you could fly home, but there's no fun in that. Here you're on the ground, moving at a slower pace, allowing you to pass by each location and connect a memory to it. Those memories you have will be the stories you'll tell of your journey. With that, your journey has hopefully caused you to become intertwined with the spirit of Sinnoh in all its glory. With the main story complete, there's still a bit of finishing up to do in Sinnoh. First though, you head back to Spear Pillar to catch the beings of time and space, Dialga and Palkia. They're accessible through these rifts that are left over from Cyrus pulling them into this dimension from whatever one they rest in. The piano keys in their battle theme give this grand sense of serenity until these intense and weighted synths pull you into this unknown dimension. Compared to Giratina's theme, Giratina has this visceral quality to it that lets you know you're battling a chaotic god who is known for its malice. Meanwhile, Dialga and Palkia represent order within their theme through how crystal clear it is. Continuing with the legendary Pokemon, you head to Canalave City after receiving the National Dex from Professor Oak. Sailor Aldrich, the sailor who helps you get to different islands, needs your help as his son is experiencing a curse that supposedly causes endless nightmares. You head to Full Moon Island where Cresselia, the lunar Pokemon, rests. There you take a lunar feather which cures any nightmare. I guess people in Canalave eat the feathers? I'm not sure honestly. Either way, you've probably noticed the setup here through the boy mentioning something or someone watching him. So with your definitely not cheated member card, you head to the Harbor Inn at the edge of the city. The dude inside makes you sleep immediately for some reason, and when you awake, you're stranded on New Moon Island with the Pokemon causing all these endless nightmares. Darkrai. You then wake back up in the inn after catching Darkrai for some reason, which would otherwise be ambiguous whether you really did it or not, if not for Darkrai being in your PC. What's really important here though is how this duo of Pokemon feed into the idea of folklore. One gives good dreams and cures nightmares, whilst the other gives nightmares and endless ones as well. Cresselia is like a guardian angel, whilst Darkrai has become somewhat of a boogeyman figure in Canalave. However, it turns out in a Pokédex entry that Darkrai's ability to put people in these nightmare comas isn't intentional. In that way, it draws a parallel to the legendary Lake Trio. Granted, we never see them harm anyone though. And if you think that was it for the legendary / mythical Pokemon in Sinnoh, well, you better buckle up. In Snowpoint City, Candace allows you to go into the Snowpoint Temple, which is pretty sacred given how they keep a guard at the entrance. At the very bottom of the temple, you find Regigigas, the Pokemon who pulled landmasses together supposedly. Essentially, Regigigas is Pokemon's explanation for tectonic plates. Regigigas and the other Regis also call to Hebrew legend of the Golems, and the Greek myths of the Titans. Again, just more Pokemon who explain natural phenomena of the Pokemon world. To connect back to Shaman, which I kinda spoiled in Canalave Library, you head back to Victory Road to meet another partner character in Marley. Along the way, she alludes to Shaman in a way that feels like she's been thinking about it often due to how it's not used as a conversation piece, but more of just a thought spoken aloud. Compared to the other partner characters, her aim is a bit more personable because of how it deals with her conflict of not being able to express herself. It makes her reaching out to you feel like an act of courage. This courage derives from the idea that if she can meet the gratitude Pokemon, maybe she can understand how to express gratitude herself. After parting ways with her for a moment and meeting back with her and Professor Oak at a stone tablet, you write down the name of someone you, the player, want to give thanks to. And so it's through you expressing gratitude that you summon Shaman for Marley. It's a moment where your own actions deepen the themes within Sinnoh, but it causes you to also reflect on your own experiences you've had in life, specifically that of a bond with someone else. But beyond that, you further a connection with Marley, but also give her the push she needed to connect with others. It's the simple act of gratitude that can bring people together, which is extremely fitting for Sinnoh and Floroma Town especially. Taking a break from the legendaries, you head to Canalave Library to take it easy and read some books. Unfortunately, you can't though, because it's time to get philosophical with Lucian. The first 4 books he tells you about kinda don't really add anything that I haven't said already, but the 5th one is most intriguing. The book he's reading is implied to be the letters Vincent van Gogh sent to his brother Theo. Within many of Vincent's letters, he discusses personal matters with his brother, his family, and his art and its progression. But the most important part of it for Sinnoh is seeing his outlook on life. In the letters I read, I couldn't find the exact quote Lucian gives, which is probably due to them simply not wanting to steal Vincent's words. But the quote Lucian gives is, "The stars above tantalize from across infinite space. Feeling their gaze from so far away, I am charmed again by life." Vincent's bond with his brother was a truly beautiful one. Theo was all he had in life. Everyone turned on Vincent, including his family at times. Of course, Vincent wasn't the most fun to be around, but beyond that, Theo kept him going, not just financially, but emotionally. To connect it back to Lucian's quote, Theo was Vincent's star that reminded him of the beauty of life. It was through trying to become creatively sound whilst making a living that Vincent found his appreciation of life began to diminish. But it was through that bond with Theo that he could continue another day. I find this quote extremely moving and also very indicative of what Pokemon Platinum is trying to get across. When one lives with others and is bound by a feeling of affection, one is aware that one has a reason for being. That one might not be entirely worthless and superfluous, but perhaps good for one thing or another, considering that we need one another and are making the same journey as traveling companions. Beyond this realization of finding meaning through one another, Vincent has also talked about his mental health many times and how he's had his depressive episodes while knowing he'll get through it at the end of the day. All around, these perspectives on life are truly marvelous in how they serve as an affirmation of one's existence. It's through being able to feel something for another, or anything at all, that we're reminded we are alive, and perhaps we might acknowledge the beauty in the fact that we exist. The human spirit allows us this, and therefore tethers us to reality so we can find some sort of meaning in existence. And as much as Cyrus wanted to get rid of spirit, that aim itself gave him meaning to continue living. Beyond that hypocrisy Cyrus holds, he even formed a bond of his own with a Pokemon in the past. In a secret room in Team Galactic's Eterna building, you can find an old notebook detailing his encounter with Rotom. It's here that you see a genuine kinship between Cyrus and another in Rotom. Rotom's presence filled Cyrus with wonderment and pushed him into becoming more outgoing in how he decided to scare Rotom one time. Many times he calls Rotom his friend, and even after the scare, he states that he knew he and Rotom would be friends for the rest of their lives. Of course, you can only find one Rotom in the game, so it begs the question of if this Rotom was friends with Cyrus. If so, it's a bit tragic since Cyrus seemed so genuine in his belief of them staying friends, and yet he became so cold and possibly pushed Rotom away. It's another reminder that there was a time when Cyrus wasn't entirely changed by his parents' ideals, and he was open to the idea of forming bonds. He was just like any other kid, but he was pushed into holding such destructive ideals. Sticking with Team Galactic, you head to the Team Galactic HQ to see if there are any other remnants. Saturn can be found, where he gives his insight on what happened at Spear Pillar and what he plans to do with the team now. He reflects on how he was absorbed by Cyrus's persona, but it was through Cyrus revealing his actual ideal universe that Saturn was heartbroken and realized he and the rest of Team Galactic were just being used for the very thing Cyrus hated, their spirit. It stands to reason that this picture Saturn paints of Team Galactic nearly falls in line with that of a cult. Perhaps most of the members never had this criminal impulse and were simply coerced into believing that this is what they deserved. Maybe the main causality of it all was Cyrus's exuberant facade that drew them into criminal life. Saturn ultimately decides to follow the path Cyrus would have if he never adopted such ideals by shifting Team Galactic's goal to actually finding different energy sources. With that said, you've uncovered what there is to learn about Sinnoh in its mainland, and so it's time to head to an island known as the Battle Zone. Just before though, Cynthia meets you at the pier and gives you her perspective on Cyrus's goal. She ultimately disagrees with it, but thinks that change is still a necessity for this world. It connects to her appraisal in you venturing out and searching for more experiences. It's through your open-mindedness that you continue letting these experiences meld you into someone who's more empathetic and understanding of the world around you. Meanwhile, Cyrus was narrow-minded and never looked to other experiences as a way to change himself. Everything was used as fuel in his one and only aim. So while yes, the world may not be perfect in terms of how humanity treats it and treats each other, but by being civil and understanding of each other, we learn what change is necessary instead of believing one perspective to be the only one. Well, now you arrive at the battle zone, where you're greeted by Barry, who brings you into a double battle with the best bros in Pokemon, Flint and Volkner. Together, you burn out Flint like last time at the league, while Volkner is excited as ever because of how this loss furthers his passion for battling. He carries the husk of his friend away as a strange man that looks oddly like Barry runs into him and makes a loud thud. Incidentally, it's Barry's father. What's fascinating is Barry, in the face of the person he idolizes and yearns to become, maintains his understanding of what it means to get stronger and decides to go train some more, instead of rushing off into the battle tower to face his father. And speaking of family ties, you meet Buck, Flint's younger brother, who invites you to the survival area in Stark Mountain. But before you leave, you look around the fight area, which is as you'd expect. It's a place where trainers seek a true challenge in Sinnoh, as though Pokemon Platinum wasn't already hard enough. On the way to Stark Mountain, you go through the challenging Route 225 with all its 80s rock glory that propels you forward. After trekking through, you arrive at the survival area, which itself is another magnet for strong trainers like in the fight area. There will be more to discuss about it later, so we'll come back to it. You head to Route 226, which comes and goes, and then there's Barry's comedy bit with Crash Your Wake on 227 with the whole apprentice thing. Buck meets you a bit before Stark Mountain and asks you to check the area for suspicious space people while he heads back to heal his Pokemon. Almost immediately, you see two grunts entering the cave in Stark Mountain as they question the capabilities of their new boss, Charon. Separate from Saturn and his group, we see those who still hold on to the criminal life, albeit their aspirations waver. It's another testament to Cyrus's influence. Before you can even find out what's going on inside, Mars and Jupiter bombard you at the entrance, demanding where Cyrus is. Judging by the unwavering loyalty they still hold for him, it seems as though they care not for who he truly is. They are still swept up in the facade he showed them. And upon defeating both of them, they decide to abandon Team Galactic in order to find Cyrus and lead normal lives. Although I question Jupiter's intent since she's the most cruel of the commanders. She, out of anyone, I would guess, joined Team Galactic of her own criminal aspirations. Meanwhile, Mars still comes off as the one who was manipulated the most, given how her love for Cyrus remains a constant throughout the entire story. Regardless, it's sad, since they idolized him enough to drop this sort of lifestyle. It shows that Cyrus had options to live a normal life and bond with others, yet he ignored these opportunities. As they leave, Charon rebukes them for their decision and states his aim is money, and then runs away because he knows you can beat him. As you chase after him, Buck catches up to you and tags along. You both catch up to Charon, and he reveals his goal is to extort money from someone, the government I guess, with the magma stone that controls Stark Mountain. Compared to Cyrus's aim, he just seems like a bumbling wannabe. But wait, that rock. A Krogan just came from the rock and stole the magma stone, and now the rock is speaking? It's Looker! He has a Pokemon of his own and he's saved the day for once! In all seriousness, Looker actually dismantles the rest of Team Galactic with his foresight here. And we also see some behind the scenes growth here in that him having a Pokemon connects to that feeling of helplessness he exhibited at Mount Coronet. Charon's grunts run away while he tries to play coy like some senile old man, but Looker already has what he needs on Team Galactic, I'm guessing. Charon gets arrested, Buck returns the Magma Stone, and Looker completes his mission by taking down Charon's part of Team Galactic. It's pretty satisfying seeing Looker go from pretty useless to slowly helping you and eventually realizing his disadvantages to then fulfilling his duty by taking part of Team Galactic down. And now, with the loose ends of Team Galactic dealt with, there are a couple bits of characterization to go over in the battle zone. Back in the survival area, you can enter the Battleground, which is this private restaurant hangout place owned by Buck and his grandfather. Sinnoh gym leaders and other strong trainers they invite to the Battleground come to hang out and battle. It's a really nice touch in seeing these powerful trainers not in a battle setting, but in one where they're just normal people. It also gives some insight into these trainers and introduces some new implications about other trainers. For example, with the partner trainers, we know Riley and Buck have their connections to Byron and Volkner, but the other three are kind of a mystery of how they got in. As for the extra bit of characterization though, Byron and Rourke get an interesting layer added to them in that they both seem to have this facade they put up in front of each other. Rourke flaunts his strength by yelling about it when his father is in the room, while in reality he acknowledges his father's strength but chooses not to admit it. Meanwhile, Byron wants to bond with Rourke through training but finds the act of asking him too embarrassing, which calls to how hard he is on his son. Also, there's Maylene and how she's starting to understand strength in another way, handwriting. It's just a reminder of how young she is compared to the other gym leaders. I'll throw this in here too, but at your own personal villa in the resort area, gym leaders can come visit you and provide a little extra insight into them as well. For example, Fantina reveals she's a fan of the frontier brain Dahlia because of her dancing style. You can also have a nice interaction with Maylene and Candace since they're established friends. Candace encourages Maylene that they can figure out their strength together, which plays into that idea that not everything has to be solved by yourself. Also, Candace mentions Gardenia in a way that makes it seem that the three of them are pretty close as well. Additionally, Volkner's defeat wasn't the only determining factor for him not leaving to challenge the League. Being the gym leader of Sunnyshore's City comes with that great sense of community that appreciates him so much. Oh, and you get to see Volkner and Flint banter a bit and talk about how they became trainers early on. Overall though, the point of this all is to make these characters feel like actual people, and not just one-off characters like in past Pokemon games. My only point of contention though is that a lot of what they say still doesn't add too much to their backgrounds or contribute to the themes of the story. The ones I picked out were pretty much it. Also, not having the Elite Four members or the Frontier Brains was a big missed opportunity since we know nothing about characters like Aaron, Bertha, Argenta, Thornton, and kind of Dahlia. Darich and Caitlyn get a pass because of Gen 5, but I mean, we still don't really know too much about them at the time of Pokemon Platinum. But on the topic of missed opportunities, the outcome of the battle between Barry and Palmer is never said in the games. It's not a huge deal because of what's implied, which I'll mention later on, and also the effect it has on Barry's character, but there is a mini-series called Pokemon Evolutions, which shows the battle and stays extremely faithful to the games to the point that I feel it's necessary to bring up here. Though like I said, I kinda wish this battle was outright talked about more in the game, but the outcome of his character is still there. It's just that showing the battle adds more weight to it. The point of the episode that I found necessary to mention was Palmer's final line after their battle and how it ties into Barry's development at the end of the postgame.
Who are you gonna beat next, son?
It shines a light on how tunnel vision Barry has been about being like his dad and how he's never had any aspirations beyond being like him. Being the champion was conjoined to this, but it wasn't really a necessity. It's not only when he defeats Palmer, but through his growth throughout the game that he achieves his goal. It's this question Palmer poses to Barry which reminds him of the one last person in Sinnoh he still needs to beat, you. Though you've always been his rival, it's here that you truly become his rival due to you being his goal. And so that's when he begins to challenge you outside of the Battleground every weekend, and he even gets stronger as you do if you defeat the League 10 times. This rise in level in his Pokemon shows that even though his adventure is over and he's achieved his goal, he's now aspiring for a new goal, to defeat you. And this connects to possibly the best quote in any Pokemon game despite how simple it is. There's no end to Pokemon. It's not only reassuring that even after achieving his original goal, he didn't lose motivation to find a new goal in life, but it shows the infinite nature of Pokemon in an in-game sense and a meta sense. It's a proclamation from the Pokemon Company by saying that even though you've finished one journey, as in a game, there'll always be more games and more journeys beyond that. And with that, you can finish up the rest of the game by catching the other legendaries and finishing up the Battle Frontier. But there's one last Pokemon that ties the rest of the story together. In the Celestic Town ruins, you can find Cynthia mulling over the painting of the legendary Lake Trio. She poses the idea of it having dual meaning in representing Palkia, Dialga, and Giratina. That creation trio balances the universe itself, whereas the Lake Trio maintains the balance of life. But it calls into question the idea of if life is needed for the universe to be balanced as well. I mean, if there was no life, there would be no way to perceive any notion of existence. So instead of looking at the Lake Trio and Spirit as a continuation of creation in the Pokemon world, Perhaps it is instead something that forms simultaneously with the universe itself. And so, with the stone tablets containing certain types, and your azure flute that you didn't get from your action replay, you head back to Spear Pillar to search for the original one. You play the flute to reveal a staircase rising beyond the peak of Mount Coronet, the already highest point of Sinnoh. At the top of the staircase is a translucent platform with the creator of Sinnoh and the universe itself, Arceus, or Arceus, whatever. Its chimera or centaur-like appearance is appropriate for the dual nature of its creation, given that it gave birth to both Pokemon and humans. The fact that it's imperceivable without the Azure Flute says that it exists on a higher plane, separate from that of humans and Pokemon. This godlike quality relates to how it rests higher than the highest point of Sinnoh, to possibly watch over Sinnoh or the rest of the world entirely. Its prominent colors of white and gold give off an angelic aura to it, whilst its red eyes evoke a menacing feeling which works in tandem with the domineering battle theme. The theme has this ancient quality to it in how prominent and archaic the drums are, but there's also this chaotic atmosphere to it in how the brass just shrieks and wails. All these elements craft this idea that you're challenging a being who breathed when there was nothing else but itself, a god. They further show this in how it has an exclusive move called Judgment. And though one may wonder, how can you catch a god? Perhaps it calls to the notion it left to other Pokemon, which you learned in the Sinnoh region's Mythology book, that Pokemon should appear before humans. With that in mind, Arceus may very well be letting you catch it. To finalize this tale of Sinnoh and Arceus, there's a researcher you meet in the Canalave Library who tells you all about his interpretation of the beginning of the universe. He alludes to the idea of being aware of the universe itself coming from our spirit. Without it, we would have no concept of said universe, even if it did exist. In that line of thinking, the universe only exists because of spirit spawning awareness. Without life, there's nothing to perceive it. Therefore, life was always needed in the universe. But if that spirit was always there in humans and Pokemon, it had to come from a progenitor, that being Arceus. So, beyond the philosophical implications, perhaps Arceus deemed it necessary for a spirit to exist in tandem with space and time. Like I said before, spirit was never created after. It was something that was always there with Arceus, and then spread to other beings through Azelf, Mesprit, and Uxie. Life itself was always there due to the existence of Arceus. But it was through Arceus affirming its own existence that spirit had to have been formed. We see that beyond Sinnoh, beyond this Pokemon world, Pokemon Platinum shows that there is no life in the universe without spirit, and thus, there is no universe without life. Oh man, I really hope you all enjoyed this long deep dive into Sinnoh and its themes. Sinnoh was the first region I ever journeyed, I guess, in Pokemon, and so I guess I just wanted to go back to it and see what it had to say. Through writing this script, I've honestly been so surprised just by how much there is in Pokemon Platinum, thematically. I hope I did a good job in this video showing you that there is a lot to look at, and I hope it kind of gave you a different perspective on Pokemon and storytelling. So yeah, just let me know if there was something in specific that I opened your mind up to, or if there was nothing at all, just let me know. Well, it's 4 a.m. and I feel like I'm rambling, so I don't know, just hit the X button, close your YouTube app, browser, I don't know, whatever. I'll see you later.